They called it the Soviet Union's Vietnam, a brutal, endless war fought in the harsh mountains of Afghanistan, a land where empires go to die. But this war, it wasn't just a clash of weapons. It was a silent earthquake that cracked the heart of a superpower. The year was 1979. While the world turned its attention to Iran, oil crises, and the Cold War chessboard, the Red Army crossed the border into Afghanistan, 100,000 troops strong. The Soviets expected a swift, surgical intervention. What they got instead was a slow, bloody spiral into chaos. It began with politics. The Afghan government, under communist leadership, had grown unstable and brutal. Internal revolts were growing. The Kremlin feared losing a key ally near the Persian Gulf. So they moved in, tanks rolling through Kabul under the cover of night. Their mission: install a puppet regime, control the unrest, stamp out the rebels. What they didn't count on was the will of the Afghan people. Outgunned, outnumbered, barefoot in the snow, the Afghan Mujahideen rose from the valleys with homemade weapons, ancient rifles, and unmatched resolve. They knew every cave, every pass, every blind corner in the rugged Hindu Kush. And from these mountains, they launched ambush after ambush, night after night. It was David versus Goliath, but David had allies in the shadows. Enter the United States, and Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia. Operation Cyclone, the CIA's longest and most expensive covert war, began funneling billions of dollars in weapons and training to the Mujahideen. American Stinger missiles arrived, and suddenly, Soviet helicopters started falling from the sky like fiery meteors. It wasn't just a war anymore. It was a proxy battlefield for the Cold War, the world's two biggest powers waging war through whispers, shadows, and blood. The Soviets responded with brutality. Villages were torched, entire regions bombed. Millions of Afghans fled across the border into Pakistan, into crowded refugee camps. But for every fighter killed, 10 more took his place. And slowly, painfully, the myth of Soviet invincibility began to crack. At home, Soviet mothers were told their sons were training abroad. But the coffins kept arriving. 15,000 Soviet soldiers would die in the desert dust. For what? No oil, no glory, no end in sight. The war drained the Soviet economy, bled its morale, and eroded trust in the leadership. Every bullet fired in the mountains echoed back into Moscow. Louder, more dangerous, more haunting. And the Mujahideen? They weren't saints. Many would later become warlords. Some would evolve into the Taliban, others into even darker forces. But in those 10 brutal years, they were freedom fighters in the eyes of the West. Warriors fighting a superpower with grit, honor, and faith. By 1989, the Soviet Union gave up, defeated, shamed. Its troops withdrew under heavy fire, leaving behind ruins, graves, and unanswered questions. A few years later, the Soviet Union itself would collapse. Its final chapter written not in Berlin or Washington, but in the mountain trails of Afghanistan. This war isn't taught in most schools. It's rarely shown in films, but its fingerprints are all over today's world. It created the vacuum that birthed the Taliban. The world forgot, but the mountains remember. The silence of the desert holds stories of courage, betrayal, and sacrifice. The Soviet-Afghan War wasn't just history, it was a warning. Because when you walk into Afghanistan with guns and pride, you never walk out the same.